Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the All Systems Go podcast. I have the pleasure today of having Veronica with me. And after, I think it will take you all about five, maybe less minutes into this podcast to be as excited about it as I am because of the topic that we are going to discuss. It's not often, it's not often that I get to sit alongside of an operations expert, someone who specializes in extracting and mapping process for your small business success. So let me do my introduction before I get ahead of myself. I already feel like jumping in, Veronica. So my guest today is we can say she goes from the spreadsheets to the bed sheets. Let me say this too. You see, I can't read the bio without laughing. This is going to be the most interesting bio you've ever heard. All right. And this is just a foreshadowing of just how interesting our guest is. So anyway, from spreadsheets to the bed sheets, Veronica Yanhs is completely open about who she is. Well, who is she? A CEO, kinky and feminist creator of the Orgasmic Operations method. Okay. Yes, you heard that right. She and her team at Business Laid Bare help growth stage startups and organizations make the everyday work experience, increasing profits and creating lasting change filled with immense pleasure and ease. And Veronica's here today to help us understand the importance of our operations, how to optimize our business, and some of the downfalls that people make when they're attempting to grow their business, and which areas they're erroneously focusing on. Veronica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Like before we hit record on this, and you and I have chatted a few times, like
Yes.
you're my people. So the fact that I get to come on to this podcast and jam about the topic that I love most, especially with your point of view as well, I'm super excited. So thanks for having me. And to all you listeners, yes, I'm kinky as fuck. And I really am just unapologetic about who I am. So there's a lot of things we can talk about. I have a lot of icebreakers. So if you ever meet me, it's going to be great.
Gonna be great, and I can vouch. It is. I don't think it took us but 5 minutes the very first time that we were on a Zoom call to just click. This is going to be amazing, and I want before we get into it, let the listeners know a little bit about your founder's journey. Were you
Yeah.
always like this, Veronica? Like as a baby, were you organizing your Cheerios in your cereal bowl, or did you have a coming of age moment where you're like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want to
Well, not necessarily Cheerios. I do have 2 memories. I hated, absolutely hated sharing my crayons and my colored pencils with my fellow, like, students. Like, this was I'm talking when I'm in kindergarten
do.
because I always had to use every single color equally. So then there's always that white, and I'm just like, "What the heck do I do with white?" Right? So you gotta find creative ways to
Mm.
color with white. I always colored nicely, and everyone else just, like, massively took their palms and their fists and just pushed so hard. You would just see that the colors, the crayons, and the colored pencils were like jagged and not even. So I'm like, I
Yeah.
wonder if there's just some like neuroticism that I've always had as a kid and like my need for order. And the other
Mm.
one was that I spent one summer taking a giant bag of M&Ms and I was crushing them against each other to see which color didn't crack the most. And the answer was blue.
Blue didn't crack the most. Very interesting.
So I was never meant to be here where I am today chatting with you. I was
Mm.
supposed to be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, an
Mhm.
accountant, something that was stable, something that already had a path. And the reason why is because I actually come from a very traditionally Chinese background. My
Mhm.
parents and family immigrated to America in the early 80s. And with that mentality, the immigrant mentality, it was just like money is important, stability is important. And
Mhm.
so I went to college to be a doctor. But halfway through, I was like, something is just not right. Nothing made sense. It was like rote memory so that
Mm.
we would all just pass tests so that we can go take the MCATs, that like the standardized test for medical school. And
Yep.
I failed like crazy. I didn't even take the MCATs because I dropped out. It wasn't until one of my RAs said, Veronica, I think based on what we've talked about over the years, you might actually like product design. I'm like, what's product design? And
Mm.
so it made a lot of sense because when I was a kid, I would always flip through my dad's popular science magazines. And in the back, there's always a DIY section. And I was always really curious about that. And so when I went in to the product design world, I was hooked. It was exactly what I needed. And it was hard because they embraced failure. So the product design program at Stanford, like they want you to fail fast because the faster you fail, the quicker you learn. But that F word is hard for someone who's Chinese, right? So
Oh, man, I can
failure
imagine.
is not an option. What is it? Excellence is standard. So
Mm.
for me to fail, and to also not get chastised, because if you have the wrong answer, it was actually great. Like Stanford believed that there was no wrong answers. Like it just helped me work my ideation muscle that much better because I wasn't gonna suffer. It was just, hey, if my idea was crazy about like outer space spaceships beaming up our food waste so that it's not on Earth anymore, by saying that out loud, it possibly influenced somebody else to come up with an actual real idea, which it did actually.
Mm.
So that
Mm.
was my background. Of
Mm.
all the voices that I listened to growing up and during my college years, the one that I didn't listen to that needed to be heard from the most was, spoiler alert, mine. And so I ended up combining three majors into one: product design, business, and civil environmental engineering. And from there, I just developed my own journey. And that just seems to be a theme for my life and business. Like, I have to do things my way. As
Yeah.
unconventional as it may be, it makes so much sense when I'm doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very helpful, right? Like you've created a space for you where you can be unapologetically and authentically you for the benefit of those who entrust their business with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think I think I was born like a project manager or something, like organization, process. I
Yeah.
don't know. See, I gotta go talk to my therapist. Let's see if I'm right. But like, I Gantt charted my wedding. So for all of you who don't know what a Gantt chart is, it's essentially a bar representation of work. So if you imagine left to right, a bar that says, "Oh, I have to like say write a blog post." So there's a bar that goes Monday through Friday. If it takes you like 5 days, and then the next bar beneath it goes from like Friday to like say Monday. It basically is a visual representation of how long you have to do the work based on how much time you have or if you're working with a deadline. So once I Gantt charted my wedding, I was like, I actually don't want to get married anymore. I'm good.
Mhm.
And I did go through with the wedding, and I did have to bridezilla because somebody didn't follow my Gantt chart.
See, see.
And had they had followed through with it and listened to when to buy the flowers and all that stuff, nothing would have like happened so last minute. So project management, operations, organizations, process, systems, like this is just who I am. I'm a
Yeah,
pattern spotter.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that pattern spotter. It gets you in trouble sometimes in your relationship, but
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me just tell you, I one day I was talking to my partner, and like 2 days beforehand, like the day before and the day before that, he was putting on his right sock first,
Mhm.
both days. And then on the 3rd day, he put on his left sock first. I freaked out because I was like, "Oh shoot, are we breaking up? Like something's happening. Like what's going
Yep,
on?" And he's
yep,
like, "What is wrong with you?"
yep. You
There
can't not see it, right? You just pay attention to it and you're like, "Hey, why did you move that? Why didn't you do this today? You always make this before this. What happened?" And, for the other type, the creative, more spontaneous person, it could drive them crazy. So answer me this, Veronica, was business laid bare your first business venture, or did you start out doing something else and then it evolved into it?
Yeah, I ended up trying to start a design studio because that's where I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug,
Mm,
and that failed for a lot of different reasons, and I was fresh out of college as well. So I would say maybe that was like my tester, but I would say Business Laid Bare is my first like fully fledged, didn't half ass this
yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say yeah, this is my first and only business so far. I have ideas for other businesses, but
Right.
because I'm very much a quality over quantity person, except when it comes to food, it's like let's get this one really well oiled, doing its thing before I move on to my next like 20 ideas.
Yep, yep. All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. People have listened, they've heard your founder's journey, they're intrigued by the intro. What exactly are orgasmic operations? What does it mean?
Yes. So operations is really just the how.
Mhm.
People often tell me, I know what I want my business to do. I know the impact I want to make. I know the mission, the purpose, the goals. But I also know I need operations, but that's about it. And or I hate operations because it's so not me and ugh, I don't want to think about it. But I'm really passionate about what I want to do. And so if there's anything that I've wanted to impart on people is that operations at the end of the day, it's just the how you do something, the how that relates so closely to the what, which is your goals, your vision, your mission, your purpose, all that stuff. It's the how to actualizing those ideas to make it come to life that much faster.
Yeah.
So, operations are great and all, but what's even more pleasurable are orgasmic operations because it means that how you do something or how the business takes action is so much more pleasurable and in alignment with the people because successful operations always begins with people.
Mm,
So if it doesn't feel good, it means that it's not going to last.
mm,
It means that you didn't design your operations to be holistically in alignment and satisfying all the needs of the people touching it, including the customers. Because when I say people who are experiencing the systems or the operations, it's you, your internal team, the leadership team, and your buyers, customers, clients, and potential buyers as well. It ripples out.
yeah. Yeah. So operations becomes the how, and this is where you kind of put your magnifying glass on the how. And I understand the importance of operations, and I would imagine you've probably had a similar experience as me in the space where somebody may have a goal in mind and
Mhm.
they've already prescribed the how. Hey, I need to grow my business. Can you help me run Facebook ads? Hey, I need more leads. I need to do some marketing campaign, right? When you get those types of clients who have already written a prescription and they have come to you, you say, hey, doc, this is what I need. How does that process work with helping them understand the importance of getting the operations in place first before we
Yeah.
start to go down the marketing and advertising wonderland of magical sales that will eventually come in?
I love that question because not a lot of people think about this. So apparently this is a hot take, but I'm like, it's actually a not so hot take to me. It's a logical take, but not enough people hear this. It's like, what happens when your Facebook ads work? What happens when you
Mm,
dump tens of thousands of dollars into marketing campaigns, sales mechanisms, sales team, sales automation? And I'm not dogging it because I love money.
yeah.
And what if like 20 clients want to work with you tomorrow? So operations is the difference between you going 20x tomorrow in your business, and it's the difference between you actually celebrating it versus you crying on the inside.
Mm,
Because operations, it's what's usually the bottleneck when it comes down to marketing and sales. It's like your sales and marketing is going to work and 20 people want to work with you, or like, you just 2x or 3 times plus your client or customer load. Do you have the ability to serve them with integrity without burning out, without
yeah.
stressing out, without starting over from scratch? And that's why operations is so important before people start thinking about marketing and sales, because I don't want your dollars to be wasted. And I also want the service providers that you work with that are in the sales and marketing departments to actually be able to flex their muscles and work their magic to the fullest extent so that you can reap the benefits. But 9 times out of 10, they can't because their operations is what bottlenecks all that success.
Yeah. And To everyone's defense, I was like this at one point in time. You're on the hunt like the average entrepreneur. I don't care if you're a founder or a just a solo entrepreneur getting started, right? Everybody's on the hunt for the same thing: leads and customers, leads and customers. And sometimes you can get so tunnel visioned, or you can lack holistic perspective of what really makes a business go. That,
Mhm.
like you said, I've got my spear and I need to go catch a wild boar. And then you catch it and you're like, oh, what do I do with it? So it's like when the marketing actually works and leads are pouring in, you start to realize nobody actually checked what happens after that.
Yes,
What,
and that's
how do we
us.
handle that, right? Yes.
And I liken operations to very much the foundation of your business house. And when you first start out in any venture, you're doing a lot of the holding up. You're the foundation, you're the framing, you're the structure. But what happens when you need to step out? It's if you don't have a good foundation built, aka operations, then your house is essentially being built straight on dirt.
Hmm.
And instead of focusing on making sure that house is going to support you and your goals and your teams and your customers, it's going to be rickety instead. And other people, when you talk about like the Facebook ads, it's like, why are you picking out the paint and the lights and all the stuff when the foundation and the framing is not even up to par? Like things are going to crumble. Like nobody wants a house to crumble on top of them
Yeah.
or their customers, because then that's a bad business experience and a bad customer experience.
Yep. Yep. It's as you're talking, I had this vision that operations is proper preparations for automations,
Oh, that is so good.
right?
Say
It
that again.
it
Oh,
literally starts with the operations, right? The operations are the proper preparations for your automations. And you are a critical piece to me and what I do, because you do one thing, you do many things, but the one thing that is the most sought after, if you ask any marketing automation professional, I call them automation service providers, but anybody who's worth their weight in marketing automation, they need to understand what the process is. And for me, I'm a visual person. I like to see the process. I can solve a problem much faster visually than I can audibly. It just is what it is. So you do process mapping. Explain to our listeners what process mapping is and the power in it.
yeah. It's like a flow chart
Hmm.
for, because we're on video, but I can't show you what it is. But
Yeah.
imagine like, okay, let's talk about the customer journey. If the first thing they do is land on the website, I draw a rectangle around that and says customer lands on website. And I also color code things so that we know what is a buyer's action, what is an automation, what's an internal
Mm,
team member's manual action. Because, hint, hint, anything that is manual, you can turn that into probably a project based template in your project management software if you're, like, say, a service provider.
yeah.
Right. So it's like there are reasons why we do things. And this is us thinking like 10 steps down the line.
Mhm.
But so a process map, and the reason why it's so powerful is because I believe that humans are innately visual. And so when you can see like your entire process, no matter how inefficient or efficient it is drawn out, there is such a rich conversation co creation that happens. Like, oh, why are we doing it A, B, and C? This is not effective. We're going to do double work because of that. So, what if we just switched, like, say, C and B, the steps 2 and 3 together, and flip it around? It makes it so that the work maybe down the line is not needed or is minimized. So the power of process mapping allows you to see exactly what happens, by whom, by what mechanism, and then because of that, what else happens.
Yeah.
And it's also a great learning tool for new team members as well when you hire them.
Yeah, you double up. In my experience, it will cut down your onboarding time immensely, and
Mhm.
you do an amazing job. Listen, everybody, I am a flowchart advocate. Some of the process maps that Veronica has showed me, I had to catch myself. It was like the drool just immediately because I understood the value of it. Like just like that. And as somebody who is my space is automation, that eliminates an entire first step for me. Once if you could delivering to me a process map solves all of the questions that I would have had to ask you anyway, because if we put automation to an undefined process, it's going to create mass confusion, right?
And
Everybody's gonna be lost, right?
yeah, and if it's a crappy process and you automate it, you're just doing the crappy thing that
Oh
much
yeah.
faster,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is a waste of everybody's time. And nobody wants to run a business that's bloated like that.
Absolutely. I'm a big basketball fan, and at the time of recording this, we're at the start of the basketball season, and I watch. I've got NBA League Pass, so they show the halftime of the cities. So it's not like a presentation or anything. And if you've ever been to a game, they load like these T-shirts and guns, and they just shoot them up to the in the stadium, and that is your crappy process. You're literally loading it in the gun and giving it to all of these people. And it's like, no, that is not what you want to do. You want to make sure you shore things up. Okay. Make sure things are working. So in that respect, what I found is that speed is often the enemy of doing things right. So Veronica, how do you balance it? Right? Somebody, Veronica, I've got this opportunity. We need to do this, that, and you can hear the urgency, but you also know there's some foundation. We've got to do some work before we can get there. How do you manage expectations? How does that look like when someone's approaching you in that aspect?
Okay, I'm going to answer this in the order that I'm going to hopefully remember. But to go back, automation is amazing when the process is really done right.
Yeah,
And I'm always a proponent of assuming that when I create the process map or the process for a client, it's always manual.
yeah,
When I
yeah,
say manual, it means I'm going to assume that we have to do everything by hand.
yes,
And it sounds so unrealistic because it's like, well, yeah, I want every time someone to book a consult call who books a sales call with me, I want to notify the consult call channel on, say, my Slack account. Clearly, we know that it's automatable, but we always make the assumption that it's manual because we want to account for everything.
yes, yes,
Because what if the manual thing that we need to do doesn't need to happen anyways, right? And I mean, I want
mm,
that Slack channel notification, but sometimes if it's not necessary, it allows you to trim the fat. It allows you to see like what actually is the step-by-step process.
yeah,
And then once you've laid that all out, then you're like, okay, with the fine-tooth comb, what can be turned automated? What can go from manual to automated? And I think this is the word that I'm always looking for is intentional. So
yeah,
when you work with us, operations, yes, begins with people, but it's always very intentional because who has time to do things that just is like fluff, right? We're already all busy enough as it is. And that's not a lean business that we're running. It's like we don't have time. We are wearing multiple hats. And so it's like by doing it right from the get go, and doing it right requires understanding what your needs and requirements are. So this is my project manager hat being put back on.
yeah,
It's like before we ever create a process for our clients, I'm always wanting to understand like who are you? What turns you on? How do you think? How do you work? How do you thrive? What's your zone of genius? And then instead of pain points, it's like what's your pleasure point? How do you want this process to go? You
mm,
actually know more about your operations than you lead on. Most people are like, I know nothing about operations. But
yeah,
remember, operations is literally how you work, how you operate. And so when someone's like, oh, I have a mom with a newborn. The last thing I want to do right now in this season is to take sales call because the baby could be crying. I don't want that. So I'm like, okay, well, what about like say an application process to work with you? And that's when they're like, okay, well, if that's the case, I want it like this because I don't have time to work all day. I want to be with my newborn. And so they start talking and I'm then asking questions, gathering information. Like needs and requirements are so important. It's something that
mm,
people miss.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. This is so good. I'm sitting here thinking you just got you have my mind spinning because I've seen it so many times in so many use cases where people just don't know to focus in this area like they should. And you said something, Veronica. You said I assume every step is manual. And this is the greatest assumption you can ever make when you're trying to scale a business. And I've begun explaining to people that automation is emulation of human behavior,
You
right?
have so many good sound bites this episode.
Dude, it's you, Veronica. It's you. So what happens is if I don't know how to do a thing manually and just in the real world, if I don't know how to market, let me put it like this. If I don't know how to go up to somebody and have a persuasive conversation, there's no technology that can just gloss that over, right? If I don't know how to nurture somebody and say, okay, let me ask this much information now because I don't want to be overbearing. Then when I see him again, I'll get some more information. Like you literally are emulating what you are supposed to be able to do manually in person. So there
Exactly.
is no magic wand where it's like, oh, I just need this software. Oh, I just need to do this thing. Oh, I just need this course. Those are all important pieces that will help. But at the end of the day, you have to know what you're doing. And again, working with someone like
Absolutely.
yourself and your team, you help people figure that out because you made a really interesting point where most people do know because they're doing it. They're just not doing it well, but they're doing something. And with you, you sit down and say, okay, I see it now. So give people a little preview of what responses have you received when the deliverable of somebody's process that they've spoken to you is given back to them in a visual way where they can see it for the first time? It's like birthing, right? I call
Yeah.
it process pregnancy. It's like I'm giving birth to this thing and I can see it now. Sometimes there's some ugly babies out there, but with a doctor like yourself, all babies are beautiful. Every birth of your process is beautiful. So what is that experience that you've seen with the business owner? Because I can't imagine they've gone anywhere else and got a process map or really had somebody fine tune and streamline their operations.
I don't get sick and it never gets old to hear your clients moan and groan on the other side of the camera. When you take a bite of some really good food or you're just like, or they're just like, "Oh my god, that feels so delicious.
Yeah,
That looks so
yeah,
simple and elegant," because it takes a lot of hard work to make
yeah,
something look simple because sometimes they're often like, "Why didn't I think of that?" And I'm like,
yeah,
"Because that's not your zone of genius.
yeah,
You're focused on something else, and it takes a lot of finesse to make something as complicated as, say, a sales process look the way we did because we have put a lot of intention and thought. Like we're thinking 10 steps ahead because when we create your solutions for you, we're not just like solving for the now. Because what happens when you grow? Nobody has time to like put the brakes on and do this all over again and retrofit Windows one more time. And so
yeah,
the process that we create or the systems, the operation strategy, everything solves the now, of course, but it will should grow with you unless like you change from like being a SaaS company to say selling MLM stuff, the
yeah.
multi-level marketing
Right,
stuff,
right,
right? So other than that, it should grow with you. And let me give you an example. So
right.
this is why being on this podcast, it's really important to me because especially for startups who are getting investing in or working on getting investment and talking to investors, it's like I had a client come to us. She did really well on her own, got a lot of money. And the first thing that you do when you get a lot of money is you often dump it into hiring people, your marketing, or your sales. And I'm like, excellent. Okay, great. Let me just get an understanding of your sales process because she had just hired a team of 5 salespeople with this new money. Just let me get an
Hmm.
idea of what your sales process is like so it can be recorded and noted down. So we'll process map it to see where things can be better. The look in her eyes in the first 2 seconds told me everything that I needed to know.
Mm.
There was no sales process. And this really drives in why operations is important because, like, you hire these amazing salespeople, but if there's no process, there's no way to keep track. Your CRM's missing. There's no communication. Who takes what kinds of sales calls? Is there a demo for the product? Because this was a SaaS company plus done for you features in some aspects. And so we did a stopper solution. So I'm not a fan of band-aid solutions, but with how fast things are moving, I'm just like, okay, here's going to be a very simplified process right now just to like tie you over.
Mhm.
And while you're working on that, we'll be on the other end putting together, and that's the process map I ended up showing you, a fully thought out, as automated as possible with manual actions where she actually wanted it to be manual from A to Z. And
Mm.
so when you work with a team like us, it's like we're able to shortcut that a lot because we know what we're doing. We've done this before many times. So it's like, here's a stopper solution that's actually really, really effective for the now. But then just wait. The main course is coming. Usually we try to do the main course all at once, but the fact that she had so many leads coming in with the salespeople just twiddling their thumbs. It's like we had to make good use of the money. We had to get going. So when
Yeah.
there are issues like that, I'm always thinking about what's the most effective minimum viable solution.
Mm.
And then while
It's like
that's in place,
the minimal viable process, right?
right. I love that. And then work on the fully fledged thing.
Yeah.
And we took that stopper solution, the MVP, and
Mhm.
we ended up baking it back into the overall sales process. So the sales team already knew what they were doing. So I didn't have to
Mm.
train them again from scratch because they're like, oh, okay, we've been working this for like a month because it took us about a month to get that revamped sales process done for them. And the learning curve was that much less.
Mm.
So that's why it's like doing it right at the beginning is important, but sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, it's like the best thing you can do is, well, one, talk to us, or two, ask questions like, what do I want from this? What do I need from this? What is the end result? What
Yep.
are some of the bottlenecks that I could solve for, or maybe somebody else can take over for me?
Yep. Yeah, and I have to echo your sentiments and your experience with the sales process. I've been in the startup space as an employee in leadership for years, almost a decade. But as an entrepreneur and a founder of my own company in a consultative capacity, I work with startups too, and I'm seeing a trend. One of the things is that the startup space is evolving from not just dominant B2C. Startup
Mhm.
tech startups used to have software, and you have software, you go sell it to as many end consumers as possible. Well, we're seeing a B2B shift in the startup space. And with that B2B shift comes maintaining, managing, and optimizing a pipeline. And one of
Yeah.
the main things that I see in there is the lack of sales strategy. They don't have the lack of willingness to hire a salesperson. They have all of that, but they have no strategy. There's no operations for that salesperson to come in. It's like they think I need to go find the perfect person who could just start calling and making sales. So when you mention what you mentioned in terms of they didn't have a sales strategy, I see this often. I see this it probably I would say that your sales of course, is more important than your marketing because you can have great marketing and not know how to sell and just have a whole bunch of leads. Your sales is extremely important, but there's somewhere, Veronica, and I don't know where this is. There's somewhere that people are missing, entrepreneurs, business owners, founders are missing the importance of understanding their sales operations. I think they're heavy on the marketing side, heavy on the advertising side. But when it comes to the traditional sales, it first off, it takes a unique skill set to sell, but then the operations and strategy to do that is often missing as well. So it's just an observation that stood out to me as you were mentioning your the case study and your client here, and I just wonder, and I'll continue to explore it. I know you will. Where what the start of the problem is, so we can more easily insert ourselves there instead of them going so far along and getting so deep and wasting money, losing money, and like, oh, I wish I'd known you a year ago.
Yeah. So one of my hypotheses is that I believe that sales and operations are we're kind of like the middle children. We're just as important, but we get passed over for other things that are shiny, pretty. Like
Mm,
humans are
goodness.
one innately visual. So I wonder if that's why like branding and marketing, social
Yes.
media, like those things are clearly proportional to money. But
Yep.
then operations is like this opaque entity that people know they need, but that's about it. I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
And I think it's because there's a lot of corporateness associated with operations,
Yeah.
especially if you've had a corporate background or you've gone into an organization where your operations, even if they're crappy, are already built for you. Like a lot of people, when it comes to operations, they only know how to like kind of massage it to make things a little bit better. But they don't
Hmm.
know how to build something from nothing. They're often
Yeah.
used to coming into an organization where the operations are already there.
Yeah.
And I think kind of the same thing with like sales is that it's kind of if you've had a terrible sales process or been sold to in a way that you never consented to,
Yeah.
or like the used car salesman, I wonder if there's just that negative association with it. And so people are just like, oh, social media is going to do solve everything for me, get me customers, sell for me. But it's like,
Mhm.
no, you actually have to dedicate a lot of space to both sales and operations and marketing, branding, all of it. Like I don't believe in
Yeah.
just working on it like one layer at a time. It's like a DNA helix. You work on one little thing at a time and you just keep
Yeah.
spiraling up.
Yeah.
But that's my hypothesis.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll continue to explore. Guess what, everyone? I just made an executive decision while Veronica was talking. This won't be Veronica's first and last time on the podcast. I think there's so many layers, right, that we can go into, and I want to just keep talking, but I want to be respectful of the our listeners, and of course we're at our time. But Veronica, people have been listening to you for about 30 minutes here. And for that listener who is just like, OMG, where has she been all my life? I think this is the missing piece. I've been trying to tell my team it's not just Facebook ads, it's not just branding, it's not this, and that. There's another element that's missing. They heard you and they're like, okay, I need to figure out how to get in contact with her. I'm ready to get started. What's the best way for somebody to get in contact with you?
Yeah, the easiest thing is just to book a conversation. Like right now, I'm doing the sales for the business, not because I have to. It's actually because I want to. I love meeting people. I love creating relationships. Apparently, communication and strengths finders is like my number fifth skill. So, talking
Mhm.
is a strength of mine. So, book a consult call. Like, let's just chat. Like, I'm the person that if we are both not a hell yes, if
Mhm.
we are both not enthusiastically consenting to wanting to work with each other, it's an immediate no. So you
Yeah.
never have to worry if you're on the fence. If it's on the fence, it's an immediate no. And if there's somebody better suited, I will recommend you wholeheartedly to them. So let's just book a chat. Go to www.businesslaidbare.com/consult and I'll send you all the links, Chris.
Mhm.
We know how to do this. But that's just the easiest way. It's just to start chatting because we're here like my mission, yes, is to get people to fall in love with their operations, but more so it's because it's to help people maintain their profits so that we can use that money to do good with it in the world.
Yeah.
And that only works if you have a really tight back end.
Yep.
Operations increases your capacity. So when you're hitting like revenue and operating ceilings, it's because your operations are not giving you the spaciousness to be able to really capitalize everything that you've worked so hard and put money into.
Yep.
So let's just chat. We're going to chat for 20, 30 minutes, have a great time. And at the end of the call, we'll know whether or not we're meant to work together or not.
Yep. All right, everyone. We'll have that link in the show notes. If you're on your phone, you can just click right now, go to the show notes. The link will be there for those of you whose thumbs couldn't type fast enough. Is businesslaidbear.com / consult. Veronica, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for agreeing to come back on the spot. I didn't give you an option, but this has been great. And I want to continue this conversation, Veronica. In all seriousness, this is huge. Once you understand how to operate a business, I'm not talking about build a landing page and generate leads and all of that. How to operate a business. This is often the piece that's missing. So many businesses have great ambition, great passion, great products, but they don't have their operations in place.
And before
So,
you end, because we were very high level about it today, like let me just give you
mhm,
some examples. We're
okay,
talking about your project management. We're talking about customer onboarding. We're also talking about retention so that you don't have to focus so hard on acquisition all the time.
yeah,
But maybe that's just my bias on relationships. We're talking about team communications, and it's not just sign up for Slack. No, it's a lot deeper than that.
yeah,
Right? So all these things that go into a business, especially your customer journey systems and processes, or systems and processes that make your team empowered and feel confident that they can run without always having to check with you. Like these are all operations. Anything that feels or anything that relates to doing. Like you're like, "Oh, I don't like how I'm always like feeling like I'm a glorified babysitter to this team member." It's
mm,
because your operations are not there. And
yeah,
whether that means it's a small refinement or we need to build from scratch, it's like if you feel that something isn't done right and it doesn't and you don't know why, it's always operations because it's the how.
yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Great point. Oh man, thank you so much, Veronica. The pleasure has truly been ours collectively. I speak for my
Thank you.
listeners and myself. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to coming on and blessing us with your intellect, your insight. Again, everyone, the show notes will have all of the links. Veronica, see you next time. And again, lastly, thank you for being you.
Thank you so much. I had such a fabulous time on your show today. So I can't wait to be back.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, Veronica, we'll see you later.